Okay, so this step will involve initializing the fields that we added to layout. And this is something that we have to do only in Android, not in iOS. So basically, everything that we add to the layout in Android has to be initialized in the code, otherwise we can't modify it from the code. So let's say we want to modify a text field directly from the code, or take in some kind of user input and use that within our code. Well, we have to initialize the fields. Again, something only we have to do in Android, not in iOS. Okay, so now we've designed the basic layout of the app. Now let's take a look at initializing these fields. And so this is going to be a step that's unique to Android, not something we'll have to do in iOS, and hopefully we can get through it pretty quickly. So we'll go to the main app. Well, actually first, while we're here, let's just clicking on any one of these random ones. Remember, we gave an ID to each one. We're going to need to remember what each ID is, okay? So the reason we assign these IDs will become clear now that we're in main.activity.cs. So the first thing we need to do is we need to basically initialize these fields. So if we give them a name, so let's have the first one be something like the choose spinner. In fact, this is the missing variable one, so in fact let's just call it missing variable spinner text. So missing variable spinner text. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this function that's called find view by ID, and we're going to enter in the type, and this is of type, no, it's not an edit text, it's a text view, and we're going to search for resources.id.txt choose variable. So for those of you who have seen these tutorials before, this is going to be a very familiar step. For those of you who haven't, basically what we're doing, and I guess we should first initialize this variable, so I'm going to fix generate field. There we go. So what we did is, I'm just giving this a name, missing variable spinner text. We're basically finding this object by its ID, and it's of type text view, so we know to look for a type text view. So we're going to go into resources, we're going to look at IDs, and we're going to look for this ID txt choose variable. So basically anything that we do to this variable now, so if we change the text of the missing variable spinner text, so we could do that by saying missing variable spinner text.text, and then we could have it say something like hello, then this is changing the text for the thing that corresponds with this ID, which in this case is this text. Okay, so that's just a step that we have to do for basically everything that we want to be able to modify from here, which will be just about everything. So we're going to have to initialize each one of these. Okay, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, and yeah, so the second one will be in fact I don't want that capitalized. Generally we don't want to capitalize the first letter of our variables. Oh, and another thing, remember to save your code often, like after you do any kind of big task, save your code. Okay, so the next one is the missing variable spinner, not text, and this is going to be, what we're going to do is we're going to find view by ID, and this is going to be a spinner, because it's not a text view anymore. And again, we're going to look in resources, we're going to look for ID, and we're going to look for SPN, choose variable. Okay, because this is the ID we assigned the first spinner, and we're going to find it, we're going to look for a spinner, we're going to find it in resources and look for the thing that has this ID. So the thing I did before was, if you see this missing line, well, we haven't declared the type yet, so what we can do is we can right click, go fix, and we can generate the field. Here we go. And it tells us to insert the field. If we choose location and press enter, it just inserts that field for us. Okay, so rather than doing that every time, I'm just going to go ahead and initialize the fields now. So the second one, we had a calculation spinner text. Because remember, the next one is going to be this text, and then the spinners, then the edit text, then the button, then the answer. Okay, and next one is going to be another spinner, and this one's going to be calculation spinner. And then we have some edit texts. And this first one is going to be field 1 text. Then we have another text. This one's going to be field 2 text, and another field 3 text. Okay, so each time I'm just kind of allowing the autocomplete to complete my words. And so we have a button. This one's going to be the calculate button. And lastly, we have another text view. There we go. And this one's going to be called, let's call this answer text. Okay, so now we've declared all the fields. We have to initialize them all. So we did the first two already. Now we have calculation spinner text. And again, we're going to do a find view by ID. This one's going to be a text view. And we're going to search in resources.id.spn. It should be txt calculation. Okay, and for the next one, I'm just going to copy it. This just saves a little bit of time. And this one's going to be the calculation spinner. And this should be spn calculation. Okay, because we're finding a spinner still, and this should be spn calculation. Yeah, so we're finding a spinner still, and we're looking for the calculation one this time. Okay, so the next is going to be the field 1 text. It's going to be a find view by ID. This one is going to be an edit text. We're going to search in resource.id. That also completes going too fast. .txt field 1. Okay, and again, I'm just going to copy and paste it twice. So once for each of the other fields. This one's field 2, field 3, and same with this, field 2 and field 3, and all three of them are edit text, so the rest is fine. The next one is going to be the calculate button, and this one is going to be find view by ID. This is going to be a button, and we'll go resource.id. And this one's going to be the btn calculate. And lastly, we have another text view, and this one's answer text. And it's going to be find view by ID. This is going to be a text view. And again, resource ID. And this is going to be the txt answer. Okay, so now I'm just going to save it. Now we've initialized all of our fields. I know it's kind of an annoying task, but that's unfortunately something that we have to do in Android. So now we can use these variables that we've created to modify any of the properties of this directly in the code. And that's pretty cool because that way we don't necessarily have to go into layout, and we can kind of have the properties change when we do different things. Okay, so that's that step. And next step is going to be looking at declaring and using some of the variables. Okay, so this part was just initializing the fields that we added to the layout. And for those of you who have seen these videos before, this should be very familiar by now. For those of you who haven't, you should still be able to initialize basically any fields we add. So we added a few different types. We had some text views, we had some edit text, we had a couple spinners, and we had a button. So it's pretty much the same process. We're always just calling on each thing by its ID so that we can then store it in a variable and then just use that variable to modify the text. Again, in Android only. In iOS you can call it directly from the name, but we'll get into that later.